Slow-mo.
He's got me walking that grief one.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me talking that grief tongue.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me clocking the
It's the Miami Night Show.
hey, yeah.
Slow-mo.
He's got me walking that grief one.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me talking that grief tongue.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me clocking the
What up, tribe? It's Miami Night, your master grief coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. You got me walking that grief walk. It's time for grief talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night, your master grief coach.
Sheldon Fertig was a hardworking, loving husband and father and an active participant in his community until his life was cut short at the age of 47 by a holdup in his family store. With his wife Ruth critically injured during the robbery, their 17-year-old son, Howie Fertig, was responsible for telling their two little sisters that their father had just been killed. He took a leave of absence from his freshman year at college to work at the store full-time, and his first job was to mop up the blood from where his father's life had been taken. After graduating college, he became a freelance illustrator and an art teacher, working with emotional handicapped boys whose parents had lost custody due to abuse and neglect. Reading their case studies, Howie came to understand how, given the environment these children grew up in and the challenges they faced, gun violence was a very possible consequence. And with the terrible loss of their husband and father, the interrelationships between Howie and his family suffered greatly as well. It wasn't until he attended his first Moms Demand Action meeting and he heard his first gun violence survivor story, 42 years after Sheldon was killed, that he realized his family's dysfunction wasn't because of who they were as people, but rather was an effect on how gun violence had impacted the Fertig family. That night, Howie joined Moms Demand Action and identified as a gun violence survivor. Howie has also honored his father on the Moms Demand Action Moments That Survive website. Currently, Howie serves as a gun violence survivor lead for Passaic, New Jersey Moms Demand Action chapter, reaching out to other gun violence survivors so they are not alone in dealing with their loss and making them aware of various services and opportunities available to them to take the memory of their loved one and use it to help ensure that others don't have to go through the same terrible loss. Let's welcome him. And welcome back, Grief Nation listeners. Today on our show, we have a very, very special guest, and I'm so excited that he's here. This is also pertaining to the Everytown Survivor Network edition with Howie Fertig. How are you, Howie?
I am doing very well, Miami. Pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much. We're going to dive right in and talk about your journey, and just tell me, how did you become a homicide survivor?
Well, on Saturday morning, October 23rd, 1976, my father, Sheldon Fertig, was killed, and my mother was critically injured in a holdup at our family store. I was a 17-year-old college freshman. It was the first Saturday that I had taken off from the store in a long time. I was visiting a friend who was starting college out of town. And I came home that day. I had to tell my 10-year-old and 14-year-old sisters that our father had just been killed that morning and our mother was hospitalized. With the help of family and friends, we buried my dad. I took a leave of absence from college. I went to work full-time in our family store. And the first order of business was mopping up my father's dried blood from where he was killed 10 days prior.
Wow, to be so young and have to, take on those responsibilities and also with your mother also being injured, that had to take, that had to be such a toll on you and your siblings. How did your siblings, because they were younger, right? You were saying
Yeah,
they were younger.
10 and
How did they
14, and I was
process that?
to be candid with you, based on the shock that I felt, I don't have specific memories as to how they processed it, aside from the impact it had on me, a 17-year-old, kid, and our family, and how it really impacted, our nuclear family, really.
Yeah,
It, it was just surreal for all of us.
yeah. Wow, that taking on, it sounds like that, if I heard you correctly, just some of the things that you had to do, like the first thing you were saying, that you had to go and mop up, your father's blood, and your mother's in the hospital. That had to be just devastating, I'm sure. Even though your father
passed in such a traumatic way. Can you please share with us who he was and who he still is to you?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So my father, Sheldon Fertig, his friends called him Shelly. He was born and bred in Brooklyn, New York. Before everybody, if you wore a beard and you had a flannel shirt on in Brooklyn, then you were like a lumberjack who was lost from me. So he was, pure New Yorker, the son of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, fleeing Eastern Europe and what was going on there in the pogroms. And he served in the Army of Occupation in Korea. When I was a little kid, we called him the ice cream man because he sold 5-gallon drums of our favorite dessert to, restaurants and institutions back then. And he was a big guy, and he would come home and I remember him singing in the shower. There were 5 of us living in this little 2-bedroom. He used to love to sing, especially the song The Impossible Dream from the musical Man of La Mancha. If you don't know it, it's a story about doing the right thing, no matter what the cost, no matter who you are. He also served as the president of our synagogue in Hollis, Queens. And he was sworn in by one of our first women congressmen, Bella Abzug, in the mid-'70s. And my mom, my little sisters, and I were real proud of my dad.
Yeah.
And I look just like him. So when I think of my dad now, we weren't close when I was in high school before he was killed. I was just flexing my muscles as the firstborn son. And, he just wanted me to work in the store with him on weekends. And after school, they had saved up enough money to buy this store when I was about 14 years old. And, there was a lot of issues that weren't closed when my father was killed. But as I walked a mile in his shoes, working in the store, becoming a husband and a father, it really gave me an appreciation over time for the fact he was trying to do the best he could, even when we weren't getting along. And I feel him with me every day.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that I have that presence,
Yes.
his presence with me.
Absolutely. Can you explain more of the complexities along your journey and how you move through each stage of grief during that time?
Yeah, so sure. As I said, when it occurred, it was just surreal. It's like somebody picked me up and put me in an alternate universe. Just put me in a universe where I was expected to be my father. I was expected to take over his role, not only in the store, but in the family, with the family unit as well, our nuclear family. My mom didn't drive. She got out of the hospital, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months later, and she went back to work full time in the store. And, I helped her. I would drop her off. I would go to college in Brooklyn at Pratt Institute, and I'd come back and help her close up the store and work weekends. And my 2 younger sisters expected me to act as father as well. They expected me to drive them wherever they needed to be and to help when they had frustrations with our mother. They came to me as well. So I just got, that's not the life path that I saw for myself then. And even in popular culture, there was a song in the mid-'70s, I know I'm dating myself, called Patches by Clarence Carter. And it was about this kid growing up in the farm and his father passing when he was young, and he had to take care of the family and go to school and all of that. And I just felt angry and resentful about being put in that position. So I just, frankly, I smoked pot, that first year after my father was killed, probably every day. And I went through the motions. I felt helpless over time, as this became normal. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
what was going on right then.
So who was your support system at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, it did not come from within my family. It came from adults that I would engage with at different parts of my life that were meaningful to me. So when I was in high school, before and after my father was killed, I was very involved in a youth organization called the B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, BBYO. That's still around today. And I was involved both in our chapter, which was based out of our synagogue in Hollis, Queens, the Holliswood Jewish Center, and then over time on a regional basis throughout the Queens, Brooklyn region as a vice president of programming. And the man who was the regional director for it, a guy named Barry Rosenberg, was there as a mentor and as a father figure to me as a teen. And then when I went to college at Pratt, I majored in communication design and did some illustration, and I minored in art education. And the head of the art education department, a woman named Amy Snyder, rest in peace, she was a mentor to me then. They validated who I was. They were life-affirming people. They knew my story. And, they were there to listen to me and provide emotional support if I needed it as well. And they really were those, almost father and mother, figures for me, which I didn't have and wasn't necessarily getting through no fault of my mom, but she just wasn't able to provide it for me at that point in time.
Right. Yeah. And that happens when we are all, when a family is definitely struck by tragedy, such as, the incident that happened with your father, or, any incident, dealing especially with the traumatic piece of it. We don't know how to help ourselves, even trying to help our children. I know I didn't initially. I just didn't know. I was, like you said earlier, you're in this world that you never knew existed, and you're trying to, keep your grounding in that. And then you have all these new responsibilities, like you said, for yourself, you did at such a young age. And, but I'm proud to hear that your mother, when you said earlier, your mother went back to the store and started working. So I know that kind of, it didn't bring, of course, your father back, but it's good to hear that your mother still went back to that same place that, took her life as she had known it away from her, but she continued on. And that's just resiliency. Even in that story, hearing that your mother continued on, I was happy to hear that you said that your mother did that.
Yeah, and if I can add about my mother just for a
Yeah,
second,
sure,
because I
please.
think it's applicable. So my mom was 5'2". I'm 6'3", right?
Yeah.
My mom was 5'2", but she was the strongest person I ever knew. When she was out of high school, she was very intelligent, but instead of going to college, her parents, immigrant parents, had a white goods store, it was called. They sold, cloths and linens and all sorts of stuff for the house in the Bronx. And she worked in her parents' store after she graduated high school, which kind of led to probably why she expected me to play a certain role. So she was always there for her family. She, having stage 4 cancer later in her life, just a quick example, we would celebrate the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, where you're not we're not very religious, but it's all relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
We lived in a 5-story apartment building when I was married, and she was in her late 60s. She would walk 1.5 miles to and from the synagogue, and she would walk up 5 flights of stairs, with the stage 4 cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just an incredibly strong woman in a lot of respects.
Oh, thank you
Just
so
want to
much
give her props.
thank you for sharing that. That's important. Just throughout this whole survivor process, and how we have turned our lives around, it's important to share those details about everyone in our family, and just letting know when we have interviews, I think a lot of them is very tailored to the word that we're trying to get out, but just that story, you don't know who needed to hear that. So I just really appreciate you sharing that. So how did you begin to accept some of the circumstances surrounding your father's tragic loss?
Yeah, so you can't make this up. So fast forward to my mid-20s. I'm an art teacher working with kids in the Bronx, New York by day, a freelance illustrator on nights and weekends. And I took a vacation during the summer with my girlfriend at the time, and we happened to be in Disneyland, and I happened to be arrested for possession of drugs. They say that Disneyland is the happiest place on earth, but I guess I took that the wrong way. So as part of I went through a rehab program. It was my first and only arrest, and I was given the opportunity to go through a probationary program, which included a drug rehab program, and the social worker who I worked with there, I credit her with really saving my life. Not necessarily literally. I don't want to, take that lightly, but emotionally, I wouldn't be the person I am today, married for 33 and a half years and with two grown sons who are unbelievable people and a great bride, if it wasn't going through that therapy. And in addition to really the drug piece of it, it was really more about the dysfunction that I felt and my family went through based on my father's loss. It took a while to get down to that, but that's really what it was about, including being angry at my dad for leaving me, which is a very selfish thing to say and to hear, but to go through that emotion, that was there. And it really, it did so much. And I know you're focused on grief counseling, Miami, and, really going through that with someone who is an expert at it as well, like yourself, really meant the world to me. When it occurred, when my father was killed in 1976, counseling wasn't something that was looked upon positively in our culture. And I think in many cultures, if you went to a therapist, you were crazy, quote unquote, right? And, to this day, on an annual basis, I call my therapist, who's now retired, and I thank her for saving my life.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Do you still have grieving pains? And also, do you still become emotional sometimes when you share your story? And what emotions arise when you hear of another senseless shooting?
Yeah. Well, first, let me say that I am the type of guy that cries at supermarket openings, right? So, you may be able to hear now or see, that I'm tearing up and stuff, and I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So I find that I still grieve, that it's part of me, and I typically find after I share my story like I am now, or when I'm meeting with other survivors, which I guess is something we'll get into in terms of Moms Demand Action, but looking in other people's eyes who've gone through what I've gone through. I didn't really have that experience until I joined Moms about a year and a half ago. And what it feels like often is an emptiness inside, like a hollowness inside, like the sound of wind whistling, in a desert with tumbleweeds going across. Like a needless emptiness is what it kind of feels like to me. And I find when I'm telling my story, and I've done it, 10 times now within the last year, where typically it didn't happen in the beginning on this call. But I think that's because of your calming presence. But
Thank you.
But typically I crack, my voice cracks when I say my father was killed. And I have to stop, take a beat, and breathe, and just compose myself again. So, that's typically what happens when I share my story. And when I hear of other senseless shootings that are going on every day in our country, first I get angry. Like I just grit my teeth, and I'm not going to use the words now that you can imagine I would say inside my head.
Oh, yeah.
And then I feel a call to action, and that's really the energy to reach out to our legislators, my councilmen, the senators, the governor, to post on the different outlets that I use, to reach out to my family, my friends, my colleagues on social media, and to do so in a constructive way.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's all about solving for this.
I truly believe that, we were chosen to do this. It's not easy at all. You're absolutely right. Some days I'm perfectly well with sharing the story. I think what I've learned along this journey, not that I'm constantly hearing it, it bothers me. It's just, like you said, when there's another senseless shooting, it makes me really angry, but I don't think I would probably still, of course, be angry, but had I not experienced the loss through gun violence the way that I have, I don't think that I would act, as you say, and as we do, as being a part of Moms Demand Action and also Everytown. I think that kind of just pushes us, or some type of awareness that comes alive in us that's like, I'm just not listening at this. I'm going to do something about it. So I feel that, you know, even though we've had these traumatic losses, that we were definitely chosen to be the ones out of our families that are saying, you know, enough is enough. Something has to change. Can you
Yep.
provide some of the statistical information surrounding gun violence to share with the audience?
Sure. Well, what first comes to mind is, and this isn't, data that, you always hear this term fake news now. So this is coming from NIH, National Institute of Health, and the CDC, right? And over the last 4 or 5 years, they have studied this, and approximately 100 people, I believe the number is 96 specifically, are
Mhm.
killed in our United States of America by gun violence every day on average. We hear about these mass shootings, right? But they frankly account for a very small percentage of the total deaths, which doesn't make them any less worse, right? Every loss is every loss. Any loss is every loss.
Mhm.
But 61% of gun violence deaths are people taking their own life, right? The vast majority, aside from that, are occurring in communities that would be considered often lower socioeconomic neighborhoods to people of color as well. And there are specific hotspots
Yeah.
within the country where that is dramatically even higher. And the other statistic that I think is compelling right now, in the midst of COVID-19 global epidemic, is that in the month of March of 2020, there were 3.7 million requests for background checks for gun purchases, which far exceeds the number of those requests in any other previous month since this data has been collected.
Wow.
So for people who are analytical, I mean, it's just unfathomable that
Yeah.
that's occurring in this country.
Yes. Ooh. Um, Gosh, I just gotta sit there for a second. That's I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that statistic with us.
Hmm.
Um, you've talked on and off about the nuclear family. What is its dysfunctions?
Yeah, so I could just speak to this from a personal perspective. And can I say here that, well, the dysfunctions are as follows. So in our case, family of 5, my father's killed. So, there is a vacuum in that unit. You've got a major provider. Both my families provided, both of my parents provided in different ways. There's all, nuclear parent families that have 2 parents, right?
Hmm.
But one of the major providers was gone. Poof. There's just a hole there, right? It's like a black hole.
Yeah.
And the rest of us expect each other to jump in and fill that role, right? Just innately. And of course, you can't do that. It's just not possible. My mother didn't have a husband. There were certain needs that she had that couldn't be met. He was a primary financial provider.
Hmm.
My mom helped out in the store, but my father ran the store, and she couldn't do it all by herself. So there was a loss of some revenue,
Yeah.
and concern about that. My sisters didn't have a father. I didn't have a father. So you get frustrated, you get angry. So who are you going to take it out on? Who's going to listen to that?
Yeah.
No one outside of the nuclear family. No one wants to hear this stuff, right? So you take it out on each other, and it blew our family apart. And the thing that was most amazing to me, and why I'm here talking to you, if there was any one reason why I am today, is because I went to my first Moms Demand Action meeting the end of February 2018. And that first meeting, the programming was a survivor telling her story. And her story was how her father was killed when she was a teenager. He was killed by her older sister's boyfriend after she broke up with him. Okay, so that story that I heard, she really, what resonated was how it broke up her family
Hmm.
in the same way. And when she shared that, I felt like there's another song. I'm really into music from back in the day called by Roberta Flack with Donny Hathaway. Telling my story with his song. Telling
Hmm.
my life with his words. If you know
Yeah. Yeah.
that song.
Yes.
That song is what I heard in my head. She told my
Mm.
story. And until that moment, I thought that the reason my family was dysfunctional was because of who we were as people.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized that we were dysfunctional because of what happened to us.
Mm.
I went 42 years, 42 years from the age of 17 to the age of 59, thinking one way.
Yeah.
And having that hit me like a ton of bricks, I knew that's when I knew I had to get involved in this.
Yeah. Talk to me about your chapter with moms. eh, where's your chapter? Share, more details about what you guys are doing. And how did you even find out about moms? Let's talk about that. Start there.
Sure. My bride saw a Facebook post by a friend of hers, a friend of ours, who had gotten involved in our local moms chapter after the Parkland shooting.
Mm.
And that was when the chapter started. So it's a relatively new chapter. It's only been around for maybe, 2 years or so, maybe a little more.
Mhm.
So it's not very evolved and sophisticated. No disrespect to the chapter members and what everybody's trying to do. But as I've gotten involved in moms, you'll see different levels of maturity amongst
Yeah,
different chapter members.
absolutely. I agree.
So with us, I just went to that meeting because Carol said, let's check this out. We were familiar with every town. We had donated to every town, but we really weren't that familiar with moms at that point in time. So we went, that scenario happened, and that's how we got started. So the way that we look at it is through three sort of different parallel funnels, if you will. It's all about providing information, providing education, and advocating for legislation. All right. So in terms of the information, we utilize social media to a great extent. And the professionals at every town in moms have been incredibly helpful and are gifted in all of the respects that help support us. So we provide information. We're in Passaic County, New Jersey. It's northern New Jersey. The city of Patterson is one of the 12 or 13 cities in Passaic County. And there's, an inordinate amount of gun violence that occurs in Patterson, to about 5 miles from where we are in Wayne, New Jersey, for instance. So whenever there's an unfortunate event that occurs related to gun violence, we will post and we'll provide information and links where they can get even more information. So in terms of education, we deliver the Be Smart program, which if those of you who aren't familiar with, it's really geared at helping families, helping kids, parents, be able to provide safe environments for guns so that you reduce, if not eliminate, the unnecessary gun violence that occurs by not having, safe, gun storage, among other things.
Yeah.
I tell my survivor story at different events and programs as well to help educate and motivate people to join us. And then we advocate. We have legislation leads that go to Trenton, New Jersey, when there is a bill to be passed, and on different specific days when we advocate. And we also, and Moms is great at providing information that enables us to all contact our legislators and share with them either, what needs to be done. And in New Jersey, thankfully, because in this particular state, the gun laws are pretty good, thanking our legislators for their great work in that regard, because that's just as important, right?
Yes.
To thank and to stay in communication with our legislators on the state, municipal and local levels as well.
Yeah, it's very important to build those partnerships, with them and actually just stopping by sometime to give them a note to say, thank you. We really want to connect with them more on the issues that we have. And like you said, every town and Moms Demand Action has done great things to provide us with things, what best practices of what to say and how to approach them. So I really, truly appreciate every training and, everything that we have that they both provide for us so that it can help strengthen us as a unit to know, how to get out here and be able to make a difference. So thank you so much for sharing that. I used to work in Kenilworth, New Jersey for some time, so I'm very familiar with Patterson. Yeah. So
I got to just say, because if you're in New Jersey and you're talking about locations, you have to associate it with an exit on a highway. So may I just say that's exit 138 up. You got it?
Yeah. But you know what I used to remember going, because I was traveling from believe it or not, Queens, New York every day to work in Kenilworth, but I was driving because I'm from the South. I don't get on trains and all this kind of stuff. So I drove every day, but I do remember always passing or saying Route 66. And I used to I used to always be so excited. Is this it? Is this the actual Route 66 that I used to hear about all the time? But yeah, I used to
Coast to
work in
coast.
Kenilworth, New Jersey. I used to
That's
work
great.
for basketball Hall of Famer Earl Monroe, and he had a
The Pearl.
he had a construction company there, and also a studio. So that's part of my musical background. I was assigned to his record label, so that was
Wow.
why I drove there every day to work there.
Fantastic. Love the
Yeah.
Pearl.
Yes, he's amazing. He's still
Yes,
amazing. I talk to him still often.
that's great.
Um, so let's see where we are. We've talked about your chapter and what you guys are doing, of course, to help end this public health crisis.
Yep.
Let's talk about some self-care that
Mhm.
you have done or the things that you do to continue on in this work.
Yeah, so this is great. One of the things that I found with this, I don't know about you, is that we all find our way, and it comes together over time. So in terms of self-care, the two things that I do are I meditate and I run. And it wasn't like this formal process where I said, okay, so I'm feeling grief. What am I going to do to take care of myself? It wasn't like that at all. When I was at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, the marathon, the New York City Marathon back in 1980 went right by where I lived. And I watched that and seeing all manner of human being, age, size, shape, disability run by you. The block before, a high school band would play the theme from Rocky. So when they got to me, everybody was, exulting, and it was amazing. And I knew I had to do that. So I
Oh,
started running.
oh,
And
wow.
I run incredibly slow, but I run 15 to 20 miles a week, and I've just been doing it ever since. Then, about 5 years ago, I was listening to an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and he talked about how he started taking TM, transcendental meditation, in college. And it's something that, always kind of I found mystical but interesting.
Yeah.
And my bride and I decided to take a course locally in TM, and since then I've been doing it about 10 times a week for 20 minutes at a time. I just sit in a quiet spot and I get into a zone more often than not, and it's just that break in the day to check in with yourself and to just allow yourself to be, if you will, without anything on your mind. And I find it such an efficient way to kind of clear my mind and re-energize myself and center myself. And there are great benefits to it, statistical data shows. So that's what I do. I meditate and I run. Um, and I'm thankful that I have both of those things in my life.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Those are two of the 7 keys of my grief guide that when I became an author, those were two of the things that I had to share that supported me. So I'm glad to hear that those things also help others. So thank you for talking to the Grief Nation listeners about some of the things that you do to support yourself, because that's so imperative. It's very important for us to understand those things that we can do in times where life gets hectic. We're not always thinking about, okay, what can I do to change my daily thought pattern, which create these emotions of me feeling, some type of way. But I also often tell my friends, my family, and I do this for myself or working with Everytown Survivor Network with Survivor Connect. When I talk to some of the survivors, I tell them, hey, develop a self-care plan. I already have something, placed in every room. I have one here in my office. I have one in the kitchen. I have it in my restroom. I have it, beside my bed, because you don't generally think about what can I do to change my thought at the moment. So if I see this everywhere, it kind of implants in my mind. And then I know what I need to do. If it's something, just as simple as breathing or meditating, like you said, or maybe I can't run right now, but that I can do, that's on my list to make sure I do in the morning. But yes, I really truly appreciate that.
Can I add one other thing
Sure,
to that?
absolutely.
Yeah, so when you're talking about it, I agree with what you're saying 100%. One thing I find, which gives me trouble, right, to get right down to some of the nitty gritty, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
when something happens out of left field that I don't expect, good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
more often bad, could be a little thing. And this
Yeah.
is probably PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
which, I believe I have.
Yeah.
that sets me off more than it should. So, there's a saying, man plans and God laughs, right? So I find those are the challenging times even now, right? I've been running for 20, 30 years. I've been meditating for 5 years, but just on a day-to-day basis, right? Sometimes I can't catch it in time.
Hmm.
And to your point, those things really enable me, even if I go, a little sideways for a little bit of time, to catch myself on a regular basis, right? Because if we're
Yeah.
not good for ourselves, can't be good for anyone else.
Yeah, yeah. And that's real talk, because I do believe that I become distracted from the things that I know that is going to support me too. It's days that I will simply pass my meditation room knowing that I
Yeah,
need to, come in and, and raise my vibration and do all the things that I know are going to support me. But, being a part of being in this club that we didn't don't
yeah,
no one wants to be a part of.
yeah,
Some days we just have difficult days. And some days, even though I do have a plan, I can't follow it, but I do remember that it's there.
right.
It's in plan, because it's in the back of my mind. And trust me, as quick as I can have a bad thought, I can have a good thought too. It's just kind of getting your mind set on, even though I'm having or feeling this sadness, and sadness is just the story we tell ourselves, but we can also tell ourselves something good too as well. So thank you, once again for sharing that. um, what are some, let's see, how can the community to support you, and what's your call to action today?
Yeah. So, first, in terms of the community support, right? So it's obvious that the community can support by joining, right? And it's
Mhm.
real easy to join Moms Demand Action, under the Everytown umbrella. All you can just text 64433 to join, or depending on why you're joining, if you're joining to honor someone, you can text 64433 and just text the word honor, right? And what'll happen is uh, Everytown Moms, the organization will reach out to you by text, ask for your zip, and they'll put you in touch with the local chapter. And there are over 400 chapters around the country. So the other thing, though, about it, and if I can, here's something that I don't hear, but I see all the time. The great thing about moms and joining the organization, the benefit to anyone who's considering it, or maybe, it's like some people dive into a pool. Some people got to stick in their big toe first and see how warm it is, right? So
Yeah.
if you're part of that latter group, here's the great thing about moms. We talked before about all of these professionals, that are there to support you. So in your job, maybe you get all of your satisfaction out of your job. Maybe you're one of that 10%, whatever it is, but maybe you don't. And if you don't, maybe there are other things you want to do in your life that you want to develop, you want to explore, right? So moms gives you that ability, right? Whether you want to be a public speaker and you haven't done it before, you want to get over that fear of public speaking. Whether you want to get involved in understanding how government works, legislature, right, and how laws are passed and stuff. Whether you want to develop your ability in social media, maybe you're not, comfortable with Twitter or whatever. Regardless of what your passion is, there's a place where you can learn and develop that. Even if you're a naive, even if you have no background, all you need is an interest. And
Yeah.
there are professionals at moms. Listen, Lucy McBath, right? She started if I understand it correctly, working with moms after her son Jordan was killed, and now she is, she's a member of Congress. I
Yeah.
mean, what more can you say than that in terms of you're aspiring to continue to develop yourself?
Yeah.
And you know how much it costs to join Moms in Everytown? Nothing. It's free. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling it in any way, shape, or form, just go to a meeting. Just join. Just go to one meeting. And there's other ways you can support us too. In fact, as there is a video here, I'm going to put on a little bit of merch.
All right. Yes.
So you got your Everytown hat. There are other types. This may not be your style, right? You've got, this is my favorite shirt out of my many. I had to look at all of my shirts, disarm hate.
Yeah.
The one thing you can't buy, though, this button, which I don't know if you could see, but it's a survivor button. And I don't think there's anyone, you don't want to earn this button, right? If you don't want to be a member of this group in that regard, then I would really suggest you join us, because we're growing. We've got over 7 million members in an organization that started in 2012. So we're getting there. The laws are changing to advocate for sensible gun laws. So be a part of it. Now is the time. Think about how great you're going to feel joining something that's growing like this and doing something that helps all of us. So, yeah, I'll get off the soapbox now, but that's really what you can do to help us. Just join, just go to the site, check it out, go to one meeting. That's all you got to do.
I love your passion, and I've heard you say over and over, your bride. It's just so amazing how you speak about your wife. That's amazing. I love it. I just your passion behind everything that we've talked about. But what what I keep remembering is when you talk about when you have we're us having this conversation, and you say my bride.
Yeah.
Um, the verbiage that you use, the language that you use to describe something is just awesome. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you,
So
Laney.
you're welcome. So what's next for your journey?
That's a great question. So I'm 61. I've probably got 5 or 6 years left before I start working full time, right? But I'm at a point in my life where, as opposed to always being goal oriented, very specific, task driven, goal oriented, right? I've been an enterprise sales rep for 28 years after being an illustrator and such. Right now, in general, I'm trying to be more intuitive. So I'm trying to be more aware of things and sort of have them almost come to me. There's this concept that when you're ready for something, it'll present itself. So
Mhm.
in one respect, I'm keeping it open-ended, right? But on another respect, on a more day-to-day basis, I'm really honored to be an Everytown Fellow this year, and that really gives me the responsibility and the desire to take my story and to spread it, to drive additional change in behavior and actions in my community as well as in our larger community. And in addition to telling my story, which I've done up until today in live scenarios, it's about using other media, and you're doing a great job of it, Maya. I mean, thank you for giving me the opportunity to meet with you today. So to really leverage social media, as we all are, and to zoom the heck out of meetings, if you will, right?
Right.
And use my Twitter handle. Also write letters to editors in different publications and op-eds, and just look for as many different opportunities as I can to share my story and help it resonate with all of us, so that we can really, as we are, reduce, if not just eliminate the senseless gun violence from our culture. So it's just looking at other platforms, right? Being flexible. This is a challenge, the pandemic, but it's also an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So it's a question of finding those other releases and being flexible and agile and continuing to grow and explore, through this time. So
I wanted to
that's how I look at it.
thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to talk about something that would be personal to you. Can you share a quote with us?
Yeah. So the quote is, "Yesterday is history, right? It's gone. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift." That's why we call it the present, right? So to live in the moment. And where that quote comes from for me is when my father was killed, he left me with a terrible gift. At the age of 17, he left me with the gift of knowing that life can be taken from any of us at any time, at any moment, that we have no control over that, right? So it's really all about today. It's really all about the gift. That's why I call my bride my bride, I mean, to just try to do everything I can, which is not easy, to treasure every day for whatever it is.
Mm.
So
I just want to sit there for a second, because as you stated, being in the present moment, the mindfulness about it, and the way that you explain your father, and I heard you say he left you this terrible gift. Uh, Howie, you mm, I don't even have anything to say after that besides thank you so much for, being so vulnerable, and helping even myself and everybody's that's listening, that not only do we have this obligation to be able to share our story our way, but to be vulnerable and just let it come out of you, however way that may be. Um, And I love one of the other reasons why I love doing this, because we are all so different in our in how our tragic loss have affected our lives. We are all connected by gun violence, but um, each person that I'm interviewing, they have such a different outlook, and their lives has taken or shifted, I must say, into this like this growing rose plant. You know, it's turned from this ugly thorn and out of these thorns into this beautiful, very violet vescent, just it's
Yeah.
turned from such this ugly thing to this beautiful thing. And I just so appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing your story. And I'm sure everyone listening to this will be able to say, you know what, Howie, touched me in some type of way. And I'm going to either do this call to action. I'm going to feel better about sharing my story and how I should share it. So thank you for coming on the show and enlightening us on how we can do that even better. You've definitely given me some ideas. Uh, so leave us with your favorite. No, before you do that, can you
Yeah.
share your social media platform so people know how to get in contact with you?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Sure. So the best way to contact me is really through Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's at Howard Fertig, Howard. F is in Frank, ER is in red, T is in Thomas, IG, at Howard Fertig. Also, if you want to see me give my story, share my survivor story, you can go to YouTube and you could just Google Howie Fertig, the present, right? See previous poem, if you will, or Howie Fertig, the gift, and you'll see two examples of that on YouTube.
Okay.
And I have a YouTube page there. Those are the primary ways to contact me.
All
And,
right.
I'm here to help anyone in any way I can.
You're doing an amazing job. I tell you that. You definitely are. I went to your YouTube channel last evening, and I loved it. Any way you tell your story, any way you share your story, I'm always interested to listen. So
Thank you,
leave us
ma'am.
with your favorite memory of your father, Sheldon.
So Sheldon, right? My memory of my dad, my favorite memory is so I worked in the store for about 4 years, and we are blessed with having a bungalow colony. I don't know if that's going to mean anything to most of the people who listen to this, but these little Cape Ann shacks, like during the summer. If you ever saw the movie, I don't even remember the name of it right now. It'll come to me in 30 seconds, like it takes everything.
Right.
But it was an hour and a half away in the Hudson Valley, upstate New York. Um, and we would drive up on a Saturday afternoon after work, and he had a big Fury 3 sedan, and he would light a cigar. He would turn on the air conditioning. He would just crack the window, like a 16th of an inch, like the smallest you could, so that supposedly the smoke would leave the car.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And he would put on an easy listening music
Oh,
station, if that means anything to
oh,
anyone.
yeah.
Imagine your favorite songs done to strings
Mm-hmm.
at a slow beat that you could not dance to, you know? So it just like destroyed the song. But he, for whatever reason, loved it. And he would start singing. Certain songs would come on. And, he had a great voice, but he had such joy in his voice. And I knew he was happy then. And when his heart sang like that, um, it just made me feel so good. It didn't happen often, but it was great. That's my favorite memory. And it would end when we'd get out of the car. And it was like we were on a rock concert stage when they had the fog machine with the dry ice. This big bellow of smoke would come out of the car whenever we got out of it. Because it was a big old El Producto cigar. Walk on the Moon is the name of that movie. If anybody
Okay.
wants to know what Bungalow Life is, with Liev Schreiber and Diane Lane. Great date movie. I'll leave it with that.
Oh, okay. I'll have to definitely check that out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Howie. But before I let you go, I always end my podcast by asking, what has your advocacy in your community uncovered that needs greater attention that you'd like to bring further awareness to?
Yeah. So here's the deal. Just speaking straight, right? I appreciate everything that our elected officials do. It's a tough gig, of course, but the town that I live in is primarily Republican, and there's nothing wrong with that. Thankfully, we have different parties, we have different points of view. But what's occurred regarding gun violence is that it's being perceived by many of our elected officials as being a political issue. And it's not, right? Guns, bullets, they don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or you're unaffiliated or whatever. And I know a lot of gun owners who are family members and who are friends. And they all take great pride in the care and the safety they have for their guns. And this fallacy that gun violence is related to any political party is just nonsense. And it needs to be dispelled in any and every way, shape, and form. And it really needs to be dispelled in the following. Here's one example, right? Getting involved in Moms Demand Action. I went to an annual meeting last year that had 2,000 people there. And I spoke to other members just like us all over the country. And what they basically said, what I heard them say, was that politicians in some ways are just like everybody else. They want to keep their job or they want to get a better job. And the way they do that is by having people vote for them. So in districts that may be red, but where Moms Demand Action, it has a presence, right? And they are engaged, as you said before, Miami, with our elected officials, right?
Yeah.
If politicians feel you got their back on this issue, they'll vote, to add for sensible gun laws. But if we're not out there, if they're not going to have the votes, they're not gonna. It's that simple.
Yeah.
So, regardless of where we live, we need to continue to make our voices heard, and continue to get the satisfaction we get from making this country a safer country for all of our behalfs. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Howie, for coming on the show, for sharing your story, for being, like I said, so vulnerable with us and giving us some great information about the statistical information and sharing just your joys about your father and your family and where you are now. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Miami. Thanks for the opportunity.
There you have it,
Thanks for the
Grief
great
Nation
work that
listeners,
you're
and
doing.
thank you for tuning in to another transformative segment of It's the Miami Night Show, Grief Talk. Today we give thanks filled with love and gratitude for our special guest, Howie Fertig, for expressing your very unique grief journey and sharing ways of understanding the healing process. This is your girl, Miami Night, with much love and light until we connect again spiritually. Bye-bye.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow
He's
mo.
got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
It's the Miami Night Show.
Hey, yeah.
Slow mo.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow
He's
mo.
got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
What up, Tribe? It's Miami Night, your master grief coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. You got me walking that grief walk. It's time for grief talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night, your master grief coach.
Slow mo.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me talking that grief talk.